The NBA regular season is approaching quickly, and I gotta admit, for myself personally, this is one of the most exciting build-ups to a season that I can remember. The league is jam-packed with talent, there's new faces in new places, and many of the contending teams have retooled and seem poised to make their own championship run. So with this in mind, how will this upcoming season potentially affect the legacies of the greatest superstars involved? Today, I'll do my best to answer that as we take a look at the Western Conference, analyzing some of the best and worst outcomes for each superstar. So without further ado, let's get into it. First off, let's take a look at the defending Finals MVP, Nikola Jokic. For the most part, this recent era of NBA history seems to be the era of parity, as NBA champions have been changing from year to year, but the Joker has a chance to change all of that. The last NBA center to repeat as a Finals MVP was the dominant Shaquille O'Neal in 2001, which is very fitting because if Jokic was able to do so, he would launch himself into the conversation of the greatest centers of all time, challenging the likes of Moses Malone, David Robinson, and maybe even Hakeem Olajuwon. Denver is also a small market franchise, and the last time a small market team won back-to-back championships was probably the Detroit Pistons nearly 40 years ago. From that perspective, I can only imagine the magnitude that another title would have on the Joker's legacy. On the negative side of things, I don't see a lot for him to lose in this upcoming season. Because if a player like Giannis can win a championship and have a first-round exit shortly afterwards, and not be dragged through the mud for it, then I don't see why Jokic couldn't do the same as well. Next up is Kevin Durant. At this point, I'm getting really tired of regurgitating this narrative year after year, but obviously nothing short of an NBA championship will take KD's legacy to the next level. It seems like this narrative is only growing stronger with each passing season. Players like Jokic and Giannis have shown that they're capable of winning a championship without a super team, yet KD can't do it. Steph Curry won a championship before, during, and after he played with Kevin Durant. And now, with this three-headed monster in Phoenix, it seems that Durant will once again have no excuse if he fails to win a championship. Obviously, putting championship or bust expectations on an individual seems a little intense, but we're talking about Kevin Durant, a 7-foot sniper who's recognized as one of the most gifted players in basketball history, and he certainly wants you to believe that he's one of the select few greatest players of all time. So obviously, if KD was to finally win a ring without the dynastic Warriors by his side, it would be the ultimate validation for his career. But if the Suns fail to get it done, then it will be just another year of people viewing KD the way they always have. Now let's take a look at his teammate Devin Booker. For some reason, for a while, it seems like Booker has been viewed as a second-tier superstar, regardless of the fact that he regularly puts up insane numbers. With a strong postseason run to the NBA Finals, or even the Conference Finals, where Booker is the top performer on his loaded roster, I think he can finally fully establish himself as a Tier 1 superstar, and as a top 10 player in the league. But if they end up being eliminated much earlier, I'm not sure how negatively it will affect the way we view Booker, as I believe KD will be the fall guy in that instance, due to the fact that he's the greater player with more veteran experience. Now let's look at Steph Curry. At this point, any success that Curry has is basically just icing on the cake, as he's already established himself as one of the greatest players of all time, and as a player who literally altered the game of basketball. With a 5th championship ring, we will have to entertain some conversations that I once thought was impossible, like who's the highest on the all-time list? Tim Duncan, Kobe Bryant, or Steph Curry? It will also add a tremendous amount of fuel to the fire for the Steph Curry and Magic Johnson debate for the title of the greatest point guard of all time. Considering the fact that a large demographic of people believe that Steph Curry has already surpassed Magic, I think a 5th championship ring may just be what he needs to finally win the popular vote in that discussion. As far as Steph Curry and the Warriors having a disappointing season, I truly believe it won't hurt his legacy. Even if they were to miss the playoffs, it wouldn't do anything to shake the foundation of his illustrious Hall of Fame career. Let's move now to a more unproven superstar, which in this case is Luka Doncic. At just the age of 24, it would probably be a bit ridiculous for us to act like it's do or die time for Luka. After the way the Mavericks imploded at the end of last season, I think much of the basketball community is just curious to see if this team can actually be a competitive team in the Western Conference. All that goes to say, expectations for them are extremely low, which I personally think works in his favor when it comes to his MVP chances, because a solid season-to-season turnaround is always a story that the voters tend to like. With that being said, I don't think anyone outside of Dallas is expecting this team to be competing for a championship. But at the very least, with another failure to make the playoffs, they'll probably recognize that it's time to blow it up, as the Luka and Kyrie experiment will be seen as a failure. Ultimately, this is one of the few stars who I think doesn't have much to gain or much to lose in this upcoming season. Next up, let's take a look at the head-scratcher that is Kawhi Leonard. He's one of the more puzzling legacies of basketball history. He was basically a lethal role player for his first championship with San Antonio, and then he absolutely peaked in 2019 as he led the Toronto Raptors to the championship while putting up Michael Jordan-like performances. And then, in the 4 years since, he's basically just been hanging out, dealing with on and off injuries, sneaking in some load management, and having some underwhelming playoff exits. As much as I hate to say it, Kawhi Leonard is starting to become an afterthought of an NBA superstar. If he wants his time in Los Angeles to be known as anything other than a massive letdown, the time to strike is now. Obviously, him winning his third championship for his third separate franchise would be a massive deal for his all-time rankings, as it would probably usher him into the conversation of the 25 greatest players of all time. Let's be real though, basically none of us are expecting this, and essentially anything short of a conference finals appearance will basically just continue the recent trend of Kawhi being seen as an afterthought. Next up is SGA. So I gotta be honest, of all the players on this list, Shai might be the player with the least to gain. Although he is certainly asserting himself as a premier player in the league, I don't think anyone considers OKC as a championship-ready team. With Chet now on the roster, it's possible that the Thunder will greatly exceed their expectations, thus giving SGA an opportunity to move into the MVP conversation. To a certain extent, he still hasn't completely established himself as a household name to the casual basketball fans, and of course, an MVP would be a great way to do it. At only the age of 25, surrounded by a roster of fellow youthful and developing players, no one will be devastated or shocked if they have an early playoff exit or miss the postseason entirely. So although I don't foresee many changes to his legacy at the end of this season, I do think if there is going to be significant movement, the movement will be up rather than down. Now let's look at a young and developing superstar, LeBron James. 21 years this guy has been playing pro basketball, and we're still having the conversation about what a championship would do for his legacy. At this point, I've given up on envisioning an NBA without LeBron James. I gotta be honest though, this isn't a year where I can see much changing about how he's perceived. If he missed the playoffs or he had an early playoff exit, his fans, and most logical basketball fans, would simply blame it on Father Time, as it's kind of ridiculous to put lofty championship expectations on a star player who's more than 2 decades deep into his basketball career. But on the other hand, if LeBron was somehow able to win the championship, that probably wouldn't change much either. Concerning the GOAT debate, those who side with Jordan would probably still side with him, considering how LeBron would trail him 5 rings to 6. So as weird as it is to say it, even if the King won another championship, his legacy pretty much remains the same. Young fans will consider him the greatest player of all time, and older fans will still consider MJ as the greatest player of all time. Last on the list is Anthony Davis. He's got the talent of a 25-year-old at the age of 30 with the body of a 50-year-old. Honestly, maybe the best thing for AD's legacy at this point would be an 82-game season. With that being said, I'll keep my expectations and hopes realistic. As in the case of any star, a deep postseason run would certainly help his career. But over the last 3 years, it's felt like we've been waiting for Davis to take the reins and assert himself as the clear leader and the best player on the Lakers. Therefore, a postseason run where Davis clearly outshines LeBron from a productivity standpoint could help finally usher in the passing of that torch. If he remains healthy for the majority of the season, and that is a massive if, the sky is the limit for AD, as he has the potential to be an MVP and Defensive Player of the Year candidate. But as always, his largest obstacle will be himself. So what do you guys think? Who's a player who has a lot to gain or lose in this upcoming season? I look forward to hearing your thoughts in the comment section below. Thanks for watching as always, make sure to like and subscribe for more basketball content, and I'll see you guys in the next video.